Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Northern Wind, the remade version from the Dragon Bones update. This has actually been updated to be something more along the lines of a popular build, if you will. And it's supposed to reflect that in a lot of ways, but it does still have my unique flair on it, which I hope you all enjoy. So, let's get right into it. As you can see, we are an Argonian for this build. Argonian is the more popular race to use, but you can use pretty much any race you want as long as you can reach the stat values that this has. So you don't have to have as much health. It does help though. As you can see, we have 40 in the health, 24 in the stamina. The magic is 20k. The health is 39k, which is really perfect almost. 40k would have been better. And you can see we have a 21,549 stamina with the build. Now, this build does have a high critical rating, and there's a reason why. It's because the monster set we're wearing is needed for the build to work effectively. And in order to get the monster set to proc, we have to have a high spell crit. So, I'll get to that in a second. Scrolling on down, you'll see that we have minor heroism at all times when we're in combat because of shulks. We also have Ebon Armory, which gives your group members 1,000 extra health, which is kind of beneficial, I guess, if they're having issues with health. I don't know. Moving on, we are running the Lady Monostone because Wardens do not get any resistance benefits like the DK or Templar does, so you kind of want to take something that's going to give them some resistance status to them. The next thing we have is Tri-Stat food, and then of course we are a vampire. Right now the vampire is at stage 1, but you really want to be about stage 3 to make this build worth your while, and we'll get to that. So moving on to the gear, guys, starting with the food, of course. The food you're going to want to use is the Tri-Stat food. Any Tri-Stat food will work. I just prefer the Longfin Pasty and Melon Sauce food because it's easy to get and it's really cheap. So the next thing you're going to want is Tri-Stat potions. Tri-Stat potions, especially on the live servers, are really powerful. They give you 9k health with 7k stamina and magicka when you use them. So very powerful in that sense, especially with an Argonian. We'll get to those passives in a little bit. So let's move on to the monster set. And the monster set we're using is Iceheart. The reason we're using Iceheart is Wardens don't have their own damage shield, and using a stamina ability that costs almost 4,000 stamina to give you something without any way of reducing the cost on that is kind of really bad. So I'm not using Bone Shield with this. I'm actually using the monster set Iceheart to give me that benefit. Now, the Iceheart monster set does give you one thing, a spell crit, but it's the fact of how the item set works. When you deal critical damage, you have a 20% chance to gain a damage shield that absorbs 9,976 damage for 6 seconds. While this shield holds, you deal an additional 1,031 damage, frost damage, to all enemies within 5 meters of you every 1 second for 6 seconds. So, it's a pretty nice set. For what it does, the damage shield especially. So we are running a 2-piece on this, of course, the helm and shoulders. The shoulders are medium, the helm is light. You want to put a Tri-Stat in the helm with the healthy enchant in the shoulders. Moving on to the 5-piece. We are running a 5-piece of shulks, and there's a big reason why we're running shulks. Shulks is the only heavy armor set that gives you minor heroism whenever you're in combat, which is really good for this particular type of build because of the way the build works. This particular setup, it's called an ice tank, and an ice tank needs to have a way of applying minor maim but also getting minor heroism in the same way. Now, you can use heroic slash from sword and board, but you have to be able to get close to a target to do this. With this setup, you don't really need that because you're going to be using Chilled to apply minor maim. And you can also get Chilled from Iceheart and 2 of your class abilities, or 2 abilities that you're going to have on your character, which can also apply Chilled and give you minor maim. And the uptime of minor maim on this build with Iceheart, the class ability, and the other ability is almost 100%. So we are not using heroic slash on this build. As you can see with the 2-piece, gives you max health, 3-piece spell damage, 4-piece is spell crit. This spell crit applies also with the monster set, which gives you another thing as spell crit. And this is how you kind of get that spell crit of 29%. And when you have one of your abilities active, if we go back to the front bar, you'll see that we go to a 39% crit. This is a much better crit chance to have to proc that chilled effect. Oops. Going back onto the gear, we are running a 5-piece Ebon Armory set, and we are using the belt or boots and gloves on that, both in sturdy with healthy enchants. And the reason I'm using the boots and gloves is because if you use the weapon sets with the jewelry, it won't keep the 1,118 health that it gives your allies when you swap bars. It'll actually drop it for a few seconds, which can actually get your players killed, I guess. But we'll go on from there. So as you can see with Ebon Armor, you get 1,000 health from the 2-piece, another 1,200 health for the 3-piece. 4-piece gives you 4% healing, which is really good on an Argonian. Moving on to the 5-piece, increases your max health by 1,118 for you and up to 11 members in your group within 28 meters of you. Your group should never be further than 28 meters, so this is really good. It helps apply that to everyone. Moving on to the jewelry, we are running 3 Ebon jewelry set pieces from the Ebon Armory, and the rings are Trirune with shield play enchants. These are really effective at reducing your block cost and your bash cost, so it kind of helps with the 4 sturdy that you're using here. Now on the 5-piece set, or the body set, I just want to set up, I want you guys to know that you want to run infused helm, infused legs, reinforced chest. This actually gives you a greater amount of resistances when you're using sturdy. So it's a really good way to get those resistance levels up, because your heavy armor in the chest is going to give you the most resistance normally, but putting reinforced on it gives you almost 1,000 more, or I think it's 600 more over what it had. So like 300 to 600 more, I don't remember. It's been a while since I've really looked, but that's still a lot of extra resistances added to your character. Whew, that was a lot. So moving on to the jewelry, or through the jewelry, the last one we're using is a necklace that is infused, and as you can see, we're using a reduce the cooldown of potions below this item's level by 8 seconds. So as long as you're using a potion that's below CP 160, it's going to be 8 seconds less, and if you look here, this actually has no level, so it actually takes the casting time or cooldown of this to 37 seconds. So every 37 seconds you can drink a potion, which allows you to get resources every 37 seconds. It's really, really good for the setup we're running. So that's really nice to have. You can go all infused with the potions, or you can go all Trirune with shield play if you want, but this works out a lot better from testing that I've found. So moving on to the shield. The shield is also sturdy. With this kind of build, it's really good to go with a sturdy shield, because using it like infused or using reinforced or using something like that, you're just not going to get as much out of it as you do a sturdy shield, because it gives you another 4% on your block. Altogether, with all the cost reduction and everything to block, you end up with about a 650 to 700 block cost in total. So really, really actually pretty good. Onto the weapons, we are running an infused shield or sword and an infused staff. On both of these, we do have Crusher enchants. This is to keep Crusher applied no matter what bar you're on, and especially when you put down your wall of elements on the back bar, it does apply the Crusher from your front bar, so it will keep Crusher applied really effectively. Whew, that was a lot. So moving on to the skills, guys. On the skills, make sure you get all class passives. Make sure you get your sword and shield and destruction staff passives, and do make sure you get the Trifocus passive. Wardens don't have a ranged taunt, and using the class ability or another skill that's going to cost you a lot of magicka isn't really something you want to do, or stamina. So using the Frost Staff to taunt your enemies at range can be really good, even though you have a 2-second delay on it. or actually it's a 1.5 second, or it's like 1 second. Some people say it's longer. I can't tell anymore. I don't notice when I use it. So with this passive, you do get a taunt, and you also get a damage shield. Now, the other thing that it is going to do is it's also going to swap the cost of what you use to block with. So it's, instead of costing stamina, it's going to cost you magicka. And yes, it still works, and it's really effective. So make sure you get all the passives on the destruction staff. Moving on to armor, make sure you get all the top 3 light armor passives. The medium armor passives, you want the top 2 and the bottom 1. And with the heavy armor, you want all of them. Moving on to world skills, like I said, you do want to be a vampire, but you want to be stage 3 to get effect of this on death. So it reduces the damage taken by 33% when your health is below 50%. It's good to have, but it's not necessary. Your health should never drop below 50% unless you take a big frontal hit that can't be mitigated by anything that you do. Moving on to the guild skills. Fighters Guild. You want Intimidating Presence and Banish the Wicked. And on the Mages Guild, you want Presence, Persuasive Will, and Control, Magic Controller. The reason you want Magic Controller is because on your back bar, you will have Inner Light. Moving on to the Psijic Order, make sure that you get only, you don't need this passive, you just need the bottom 2, Concentrated Barrier and Deliberation. Because with one of these abilities slotted, you get a 5k damage shield, but since we have points in the CP, it goes up to 5,800. Makes it really effective when you're tanking on a sword and on the sword and shield bar. And then also you're going to have Deep Thoughts. And Deep Thoughts is going to allow you to use Concentrated Barrier. And then whenever you activate and use Deep Thoughts, you're going to channel, which is going to also give you major protection for 30 seconds. It's very, very powerful buffs. Moving on to the Undaunted, you want to make sure you get the 2 Undaunted passives. You can use the ranged taunt if you want to, but there's really no necessary reason to when you have an Ice Staff. Moving on to the Assault bar, or Assault skills. You want to just make sure you get Aggressive Warhorn out of it, and nothing out of Support. When you're looking at the racial passives, Argonian or any racial, you want to make sure you just fill in all the passives so that you can gain the greater benefit of what the race offers. In this case, you do get Resourceful. Whenever you drink a potion, you restore 4,620 extra health, magicka, and stamina. That is crazy good. Whew. Moving on. Argonian Pet Resistance gives you 9% max health. This one also gives you 3% max magicka, which kind of plays into the build, which is kind of nice. And then you get Quick to Mend, increasing your healing done and healing received. That 5% does stack with the 4% from Ebon Armor, which is nice, so you get a 9%. With the way our CP is set up, you get another 5%, which is a 14%, and then the Heavy Armor passive on top of that gives you a total of a 22% healing received, which is crazy. Because on top of that, you also have a 15% healing done. Actually, it's a little bit more than that. So, moving on to the Alchemy skill, make sure you get Medicinal Use. This is really, really important for playing any tank or any DPS or anything at endgame. You want to make sure that you have that that 30% longer effect on potions. Provisioning, Gourmand and Connoisseur, both very good to have. Not necessary, but good. Alright, moving on to the skills. On our main bar, we are using Pierce Armor. The reason you're using Pierce Armor is for Major Fracture, Major Breach, and a Taunt. Don't worry about the damage too much, because you're not here to do damage, you're here to tank. On to the next ability, you are using Deep Slash. Deep Slash is a really effective ability because it applies Minor Maim to up to 3 targets, also reducing their movement speed by 60% for 4 seconds. So if you have 3 enemies running in front of you, let's say, and you go to use an ability to kind of slow them down, you can hit Deep Slash and it'll do that. And it also applies Minor Maim, which is really pretty good. So I will be showing off all these skills in action here in a minute. Moving on to the next ability, we are using Arctic Blast, not Polar Winds. Polar Winds is actually a really bad ability for this particular build setup, because of the fact that Polar Winds does not apply chilled off of your class passives. That's the one thing that makes the Warden very unique, is you can apply chilled off of Glacier Presence. Increases your chance of applying chilled to enemies with Winter's Embrace abilities by 200%. This can apply chilled and pretty much keep it up all the time, almost by itself. So really good ability. It also heals you for 13% of your max health, and additionally 10% of your max health every 10 seconds. Super effective, by the way. The winds freeze the enemies around you, dealing X amount of frost damage. You're not really worried about the frost damage, but the damage of this ability is actually increased by your max health. And I'll show you guys what I mean by that here really quick. And I also want to show you another benefit of the next ability. So I'm going to go up here, and before I show you the thing about the max health on that, I want to show you this. This shield is amazing. Shimmering Shield is probably one of the most powerful projectile absorbing shields in the game, because it absorbs up to a total of 69,000 damage, and this shield is based on your max health. The other nice thing is every time you absorb a projectile, you get 595 magic back, and you also get major heroism. With using Shulks and this ability, you get major heroism and minor heroism almost non-stop. So just to show you guys, when I fall off here, I'm going to take falling damage. I'm going to pop this ability. I get 43. My health goes up to 43,000. Now look at this. This goes up to 2,311 frost damage. This goes up to 75,000 damage absorbed. Both these abilities are very, very, very useful on an ice tank. And that's the main reason why we're using the two abilities together, is they work very well. The next ability we have is Deep Thoughts. Now, Deep Thoughts is a very unique ability because, one, it gives you health back every second while you're meditating. And then on top of that, it gives you magic and stamina back. But this is every second it's every second that you let it linger. So if you activate the ability, you can sit here and just stay like this and get health, stamina, magicka. But you don't want to keep it up too long, maybe 3-4 seconds at most if you can pull it off. But if you can pull off 3 to 4 seconds in combat, you can also pull off a heavy attack. So just remember that. So this is really good for resource managing, especially if you're struggling with resources. This gives you that. Also, it gives you that 30% damage reduction while it's active. Really, really effective. The next ability we have here on our bar is mainly for, like, those oh crap moments. Like when you're in a very bad spot, everyone's getting hurt really bad, you can pop this next ability if you need it. And that it's a great ability. It does do damage over time. Don't worry about that. It also reduces enemy movement speed by 70%, which is a great CC, and it lasts for 8 seconds. While it is up and lasting, you and nearby allies also gain major protection, reducing your incoming damage by 30%, which is also crazy. While slotted, you gain max magicka increased by your max magic is increased by 8%, which is good because of the way this build plays. You want that 8% max magicka. If you don't have that 8%, you're going to be sitting at about 18k with the way it's set up. Moving on to the back bar, we have Blockade of Frost. The reason we are using Blockade of Frost is if you read what the ability does itself. One, it's a CC. It reduces the movement speed of enemies by 60% for the duration, which is 8 seconds. Chilled enemies, which this can apply chilled, will also become immobilized for 4 seconds. Now, if you look at the range on this, this is an 18 meters long, 12 meters wide ability. Arctic Blast is 10 meters wide. That means it blasts out 10 meters. So it almost covers the width of this path and over half the length. So anything coming through there while Arctic Blast is going and this wall is down is going to get chilled, which will, guess what? Then in turn become immobilized. So this and Arctic Blast are necessary for crowd control in trash fights. Not against bosses, just crowd control in trash fights. Up against a boss, it's still good to keep the chilled applied to them because it can keep minor maim up on them. And yes, bosses can be affected by chilled Just so you guys can see, I will show you real quick. These are considered boss mobs now, and this is a raid boss encounter health bar. So if you look, there's chill. This can be affected by minor maim, and if you can get minor maim to proc enough, you can keep it up a lot. So you do need some other abilities to help you do that. And shield also does take damage, so it's kind of nice. Alrighty, moving on to the next skill we have on our bar, which is Lotus Blossom. Now, a lot of people like to use the Leeching Vines. If you were going to play more standard, like popular tank or meta tank, Leeching Vines would be what you'd want to go with. In this case, you want to go with Lotus Blossom. And there is a big reason why you want Lotus Blossom. First off, Lotus Blossom is activated. Every light attack you do heals. It heals you or somebody else. And as you can see there, that's 1910. 5,702. That's 9k healing that you could be applying to your allies to give them health back. And you can do that with light attacks or heavy attacks. So you can get bigger heals and greater heals for you and your allies, which makes it really effective in the long run. So Lotus Blossom, in my opinion, is a lot better, but it also gives us major proficiency, which we need to proc Ice Heart. So it's really, really good to have this for that Ice Heart proc. The next ability we have on our bar is Blue Betty. The reason we have Blue Betty is for the Magicka return, mainly. It does grant us major sorcery, but it's also the final bit that is really important, which is when the Netch is summoned, it removes a negative effect on you. It has no cost. So you can sit here and just cast this anytime you get a negative effect on you, as long as you stay out of the area where the negative effect is. It's amazing. So, and it's not super like amazing, it's just really good to have because it costs you nothing and it lasts for 27 seconds. The next ability on our bar is our resistance buff. This gives us this is Ice Fortress. It gives us Major Warden, Major Resolve. It also applies this to our allies within 8 meters of us. So anyone standing within 8 meters of us will also gain Major Resolve and Major Ward. You want to cast this before you start the encounter, and then keep it applied every 24 seconds. It also gives you minor protection, increasing your damage reduction by 8%. So this is really good, and I'll get to the reason why here in a second. In a minute, actually. The next ability we have on our bar is Enter Light. We only have this here for the 5% Max Magicka and that 2% Mage's Guild ability thing, Magicka Controller. This gives us an almost equivalent amount of Magicka that we have on our front bar. So when we're swapping bars, we're not losing too much on the Magicka side. The last ability we have on our bar here is Aggressive Warhorn. This is going to be your main ability when you're playing through Trials. You're going to keep this up as much as you can, and the main reason why you're going to want to keep this up as much as you can is because it does increase yours and your group's max magicka, health, and stamina by 10%, and it grants your allies and yourself major force, increasing damage, critical damage done by 15% for 9.5 seconds. So overall it's really good. And that is the skills. So now we're going to move on to CP, guys. And this is where things are going to get a little different. We do have 56 in Ironclad, reducing damage taken from direct damage effects by 20%. This does stack with Hardy and Elemental Defender, which are the two main damage reduction things you're going to be using. Now, any minor protection, major protection, anything you cast on you or anyone else is also affected by this only. I have tested this. Only these are affected with it. So those directly stack on top of this, Hardy and Elemental Defender. So that 8% stacks onto this 12%, making it a 20% increase in damage reduction. And if you add on top of that, when I meditate, if I have my Frost Cloak up, I get another 30% damage reduction. That is a 50% damage reduction that I get from this. My resistances give me 46% damage reduction. Or damage mitigation. So I mitigate 46% of the incoming damage and 50% of that damage if I have major protection. That's why this works out so well. Most damage you take is direct damage from enemies, so this helps apply to that. And any damage you take from direct damage is reduced by 20%. That means if it is direct damage, poison, disease, or physical, that's a 40% reduced damage. If it's anything flame, frost, shock, or magic damage that's direct damage, 40%. Now, we do have 23 into thick skin, but please understand, this does not apply to area of effect damage. Area of effect damage, like ground target AoEs, those kind of things, are still damage that you're taking and are only affected by hardy and elemental defender. This will mitigate poisons, bleeds, disease, chilled, things like that, and damage over time effects only. This does apply, though, and stack onto this, so you do get a 30% damage reduction when your Frost Cloak is up. So you want to keep that Frost Cloak up as much as you can so you can mitigate the most damage from it. Now, like I said, if you're taking fire damage, it's only this. So you're going to get 20% damage mitigation from it. This is why a lot of people use Sword and Board, because with Sword and Board and the passives from Sword and Board, you can block up to an additional 20% of the damage you take. And that's any damage, except for effect damage. So that means poison, bleeds, and things like that you can't mitigate. Area of effect, damage over, like area of effect, damage over time stuff, you can mitigate with your sword and shield while holding block. You can mitigate that that direct damage more by blocking. So you get the idea. Blocking is really good. So that's why we have this set up that way. Moving on, though, we have 40 into Bastion. This increases our effectiveness of damage shields that we apply to ourselves by 16%. Now, this does carry into damage shields that you can apply onto others, but we're playing a Warden, so our only damage shields we have are the block barrier from the Sigil Order and the monster set. So that 40% or that 16% applies to both of them. And it's pretty good. It's fairly effective. It's not as effective as I personally like, but it works. Moving on, quick recovery, 5%, 19 points. Now, there is a big reason why I chose the 5%. We are an Argonian who gets 5% initially. With another 5% on top of that, that is a 10% increase. With the 4%, the 8%, as I've explained earlier, you get a lot of healing received. Moving on to the green tree, we have 56 into Warlord. This reduces the cost to break free by 20%. If you guys didn't know what break free is when you block and then press attack when something stuns you. It costs you 4,000 stamina to break free. With this 20% reduction, it actually only costs you about, see, it's like 1,800 less. So it's like 2,000 or... no, yeah, it's like 2,700, something like that. So it's not costing you as much to break free, and it's a lot better with saving you resources if you have to break free. So it's really, really good to use the break free passive. The next one we have is 26 points in the bashing focus. As you can see, our reduced cost in bashing is 15%. I want to show you guys this because we do have 2 bashing cost reduction. Look at our stamina right now, it's 21,549. When we bash, we only used about 400, not even 400, about 300 of our stamina to do it. And you do bash as a player, you will bash enemies. So, and the reason you'll bash enemies is to set them off balance and to interrupt them. If you see them doing something like a heal or something on a healer, you can walk up and bash them. You need to save those resources on your stamina. And that really saves you a lot with the cost reduction and this. So, just letting you know. You'll see that I have no points in the sprinter, which is kind of interesting. I do have 43 into tenacity. This increases the stamina return and magical return we get from our fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. We are using 5 pieces of heavy armor, which adds another 25% on top of that, which makes it a 35% increase. And then wearing 5 pieces of heavy armor gives you yeah, that's with 5 pieces of heavy armor. But on top of that, we get another 30%. So we actually get a 65% of our resource return when wearing heavy armor and using 10 points into tenacity. Moving on to the final section of the green tree, we have 44 into tumbling. This gives us a reduced dodge roll cost to 17%. This is pretty good. It saves us some extra stamina, not as much as some people would like, but it's enough, trust me. Next, we have 81 into Shadow Ward. This reduces the block cost of your stamina blocking by 24%. With all the other block cost reductions we have, this saves you a ton of resources. So, moving on to the blue tree, we have 49 into Bless. This increases your healing done by 11%. Now, remember, we already get 5% healing done because we do get that benefit. So that's a 16% increase in our healing done. So that's a really good benefit for being Argonian. The next one we have is 61 into Elfborn. The reason we have 61 in here is to give us a 21% increase in our critical healing. So this critical healing is boosted, like your crits anyways are 50%. So this increases it by another 21%. So it's a 71% increase in your crit healing. It does apply to damage too, which is kind of nice because this build can be both main tank and off tank. So it's really good. The next ability we have is 56, or the next thing we have is 56 in the Elemental Expert. This increases our Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 12%. For being a Warden, you get 6% increase in Frost damage. So that's an 18% in total, which is really good. Because guess what most of your abilities do? Besides physical damage, they do Frost. So they are benefited by that ability. Now, I did find out something the other day, just to let you guys know, when it comes to the CP passive. None of the CP or ice abilities that a Warden uses are affected by Thaumaturge. The only ability by the Warden that is affected by Thaumaturge is 1. They only have 1 ability that is affected by Thaumaturge, and that is Swarm. All the other abilities are not affected by Thaumaturge. So, like, the Winter's Embrace abilities, none of these, not even Northern Storm, is affected by Thaumaturge. All of them are only affected by Frost Increase. So that's why it's really important to put into this stuff over here more than it is over there. We did put 1 point into Spell Erosion because we didn't have any other place to put it. And then we have 40 into Master at Arms. We mainly have that for Reposit because Reposit's pretty nice. Whenever you block a melee attack, you have a 15% chance to redirect damage back to the enemy, which is always good. And then we took 43 and put it into Mighty to increase our physical damage of like our heroic our deep slash and our taunt, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I didn't really have any other place to put these because if I were to put them into Blessed or Elfborn or this, it would have just made a lot of that stuff just kind of bloated, and I wouldn't be getting as much out of them where they're at right now. Like, I could have put more into this and gone up to like 14%, but honestly, this works out really well with the way the build's set up. And that, guys, is the Northern Wind. Now, I know a lot of you guys are used to me showing off these builds, taking on like world bosses and stuff like that. In this, though, we're just gonna kind of, I'm just gonna say that you can test it or play it or whatever if you want. You can make it on PTS. I can test it pretty much, you know, in like Dragon Fanglair and Skullcaller if you wanted to, or even in any of the trials that are available to me. And it's not going to really show you the true potential of this build until you play it yourself. Because I can't determine how well a build's going to work until it's in a player's hands. I can just tell you from my own experience, I've been playing this on live for a while, and it's an awesome build. It's an amazing build. So, but I haven't played it like this. I have tested it like this on PTS, and I will admit, for somebody who doesn't like the meta, as a lot of people say, this is one build that I would play. And the reason why I play it is because I love how unique it is. I love how diverse it is, and I love how it really flows well with the abilities, the gear, the skills, the passives. All that stuff works together so well that it just gives you really good overall playstyle. It's a really fun build. I have tested it. I have played it. I have played it in a dungeon, several in fact, but on the live servers. Now on the live servers, I don't play the build like this. I actually have like an 18k stamina with like a 27k magicka, but that's just preference of play, and it works amazing, and I love it, and I have fun with it. So, but you can play it how you want, and this seems to be the way that a lot of people like it. So play it, enjoy it, have fun. So if you guys had fun watching this video and enjoyed this video, you can hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me or other things by me, you can hit that subscribe button. Other than that, all I have to say is thanks for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.